Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're glad you could be here with us during what always seems to be a hectic time of the year. I'm Greg Galinsky, Director of Analytics here at Klingenstein Fields Advisors. To start with, we just like to wish everyone a very happy and healthy holiday season and new year. Hopefully you'll get a chance to relax, spend some time with family and friends. As always, we appreciate the trust and confidence you place in us and look forward to continuing to work with you closely in the future. As we look to the end of December, we encourage you to contact us soon with any year-end transactions you might want to execute or any questions you might have so we can make sure everything goes smoothly. And before we move on to today's topic, we'd just like to remind you that you can find our perspectives and thoughts on a variety of issues of interest on our website, klingenstein.com. We encourage you to follow, like, and share our posts on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And you'll find today's webinar on our YouTube channel in the next day or so, as well as past webinars we've conducted. In addition, after the webinar today, we'll distribute a short paper highlighting some of the key takeaways, which is also available on our website. So now on to today's topic. We're pleased to continue with the second part of our series on cybersecurity. This is a topic of ongoing interest to all. And at this time of year, cyber criminals are particularly active in trying to take advantage of unsuspecting victims. While technology can help you make important steps to protect yourself and your family, it's not the only thing you need to do or be aware of, as you will hear our experts discuss. We are fortunate to have two powerhouses with us here for this webinar to talk about trends in cybercrime and cybersecurity, the importance of maintaining vigilance, the steps you can take, and some fascinating anecdotes about experiences they've had around the world. I'd like to welcome Dr. Ondrej Krehel and Adam Levin, both of whom are highly regarded experts in the field of cybersecurity and cybercrime. Ondrej served as Chief Information Security Officer of CyberScout before leaving to launch LIFARS, a preeminent global security firm that provides incident response, security, and cyber advisor services working with major US and international intelligence and law enforcement agencies around the globe. He's known worldwide for his digital forensic expertise, frequently serving as an expert witness. Adam Levin's the founder of CyberScout, previously known as IDT 911, which is a leader in identity theft education and resolution, identity management, data breach response, and data breach response services. CyberScout became part of Sontiq in early 2021. He's a co-founder of Credit.com, which is a credit education, information products, and services company. In addition, he's the author of Swiped, How to Protect Yourself in a World Full of Scammers, Phishers, and Identity Thieves, and host of the weekly podcast, What the Hack with Adam Levin. He appears regularly on media, dedicated to educating consumers, businesses, and regulators on identity management and protection, privacy, credit, and election security issues. We're going to start out today with some prepared comments from Adam and Ondrej, after which we'll move on to an interactive Q&A session. So we've already had some great questions that come in that will get us started, but please submit additional questions that you might have. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for, but anything that we don't get to during the call, we'll follow up individually to make sure they get addressed. So during this call, you can submit questions in one of two ways. If you're listening through your computer, there's a widget on the right where you could submit questions. Alternatively, you can email them at any time to mildredpalo@klingenstein.com. So that's MILDRED@KLINGENSTEIN.com. So without further delay, Adam, how about you start us out with some thoughts on today's topic?
Gregory, thank you very much, and thank everyone for helping us put this together. I also want to thank Albert Bellis, who I managed to cajole into helping me get everyone inspired to do this. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak today to everyone at Klingenstein Fields Advisors and guests. So let's get going. So I'm Adam Levin, and most people think of me as the chairman of the Cyber Insecurity Guild Society. So look, if you're in a group of people being chased by a bear, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than at least one person in your group. Now, in the world of hackers, a bear is somebody working out of Russia. Now, you may have heard of Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear. They're probably the best known attackers operating out of Russia. But the truth is that most attacks originate in Russia these days. Sure, now China, North Korea, Iran more recently Afghanistan, have their fair share of hackers, but Russia's the big dog, or the big bear. They predominate. And unlike bears in the wild, there's no outrunning cyber predators. I mean, you could go dark, you could do that. I mean, if it appeals to you and you can remain a gainfully employed human being and not lose your mind. But if you're like most of us living in the real world, going offline, going dark, doing the Unabomber thing, none of that is really an option. And so we have to face the enemy, and the enemy's everywhere. In any moment of the day, you'll find the enemy in your inbox. The enemy can be found in high concentrations on social media accounts with wide open privacy settings. They frequent the dark web. They go to websites your children visit. Sometimes they own those sites. They may be behind the pop-up ads on your computer. They lace pornographic imagery. They actually lace cute cat pictures with malware that lurks in the background, dormant, undetected, and often undetectable by the best antivirus software, till the threat actor that sowed that seed decides to wake it up. They could be running the public Wi-Fi you used the last time you were forced to connect for somewhere on the go with your laptop or your smartphone. And because you use that Wi-Fi connection, they may have free access to your financial accounts. Now, sometimes the pain is immediate. Sometimes the hacker's objective is headline news. Other time, the hack happened a long time ago with no consequences because either the hacker was interested in a larger event of which you or your computer are a part, or they might be targeting you to get to your employer, a friend, or a member of your family. And sometimes they hold on to banking information for so long that when they siphon off your credit and your assets, it can no longer be traced back to whatever got you hacked in the first place. The bottom line, if you haven't been compromised, hacked, or scammed online yet, with all due respect, it isn't because you're smarter or better informed than anyone else. It's because you've been lucky. And luck is not the best strategy when it comes to getting ahead in business or in life. It doesn't hurt, but it's a plan. So let me explain. It's bad luck to come across a scam when you're not really paying attention, which is something most of us do. Just think about the amount of time we spend online staring at our connected devices. You may not even know what you did to end up with a locked screen. Did those folks that sent you the ransomware, was it in a text? Was it in an instant message? Did it come by way of email? Did you provide them with some information? Maybe a password? Well, life happens, and in that chaos, hacks thrive. The person who reaches out to you about your little problem, well, they may be very polite. He, and it's almost always a guy, may sound not quite like they're from next door, but nice. And it may sound like everything's going to be fine so long as you send money or cryptocurrency or the codes for gift cards that you hurriedly purchased at the closest pharmacy. The problem is, he may not be competent. Many hacking syndicates rent out the malware used to hijack your life, except they don't know how to use it. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And let's face it, you're dealing with a criminal. Is that really who you want to trust when your digital fate is in the balance? Look, it all sounds pretty bleak. And the answer, of course, to your question, who should you trust in dire straits? No one. You should trust no one. And for all you know, my colleague Ondrej could be hacking you while I'm talking. This presentation could be a heist. The fact is, the only person you can trust is you. Scary, right? Well, we all know how untrustworthy we can be when it comes to our digital lives. We reuse passwords. We don't protect our Wi-Fi at home. We let our kids play on devices that can easily, sometimes without a password or a fingerprint or a face scan, provide access to our money, our records, or our most private lives. That very same completely fallible person you see when you look in the mirror is the only person you should trust in a digital world where getting hacked is the third certainty in life behind death and taxes. There are bears everywhere, and there's no outrunning them. What you need to do is learn how to make yourself harder to hit. You need to use long and strong passwords. Pause before you click on any link or open any attachment. Read reviews before downloading any app. Freeze your credit. Set up transactional alerts with your bank, your credit union, or your credit card company, and two-factor authentication wherever it's available. You should consider subscribing to an identity monitoring service. Many third-party resellers and all of the credit reporting agencies offer them. And you should also get a robust program that includes instant notification, also known as Me Not Me, as well as dark monitoring, which means they don't tell you, oh, by the way, 3 weeks ago, someone opened an account in your name, but someone is opening an account in your name right now. Is it you? Yes or no? You also need to have the big talk with your family and loved ones about cyber hygiene. And it is, believe it or not, no less important than the big talk you have with your kids about sex and drugs. Because remember, you're only as secure as the least secure person on your networks. And you need to wrap your head around the fact that despite all of this, someday it's going to fail and you're going to get got by the bad guys. And this last part, this last step, this is a good place to be. Here's where you become a very trustworthy person in your digital life. Because once you figure out that it's just a matter of time, you can spend some time getting ready for the inevitable by setting up things like regular backups for all your systems and keeping an air-gapped copy, and I mean completely and always offline, that's updated regularly. From there, you're going to check with your financial institutions, your insurance companies, and your employer to find out what kind of program they have to help you through a cyber incident. You're going to get your ducks in a row. And you may even get a white glove service as part of this process that's going to help you navigate the really kind of tricky, scary waters of getting your identity back. And maybe they also have connections with somebody at one of the alphabet agencies, someone who can get the cogs of justice turning a lot faster than if you can, if you just went down and filed a report with your local police department. But most of all, you're not going to freak out. You're going to know that in this cyber war zone, you're not only your worst enemy, but your only hope as well. In a zero trust environment, you have to be your own hero. And it starts with some basics that Ondrej and I will be discussing a little later. So look, if you're hungry for more abject terror, buy my book. But if you don't, I hope that at least you'll take one really important thing away from today's presentation. You are your own best protection against hackers. And now my colleague Ondrej is going to continue and in fact enhance this presentation in terms of scaring you half to death. Ondrej, are you here?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm here. Hello,
I hear
everyone.
you. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Adam, for kind words of introductions into the world of the cyber. Can I share my screen? Let me see here.
Just 1 second.
Okay, great.
Okie dokie.
Okay, let me see. All right. Can you see my screen?
No, let me try.
No. Technology.
Technology always has something in it. All right, I got it now. I think I got it now. Okay, how about now?
Now,
Not yet?
Yes, no, you're good.
You're good.
Okay, perfect. So let me tell a little bit, what are you going to be facing when it comes to the cyber? And generally what we describe are type of what we call them threat actors that would be actually going after your personal data, your financial data, and also for your businesses. So why you would be a target? Our experience is stemming from working with many of the law enforcement agencies. And if you Google history, we're very privileged to work with Adam on many of the cases that end up as an indictment by Department of Justice with the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Interpol, NATO, Secret Service, and Europol. So we've seen these threat actors just taking very simple individuals to more sophisticated, high net worth individuals to the enterprises. Most likely, you will deal with one of the issue in a cyber, and you will get it. It's just almost get a sickness in a life. That's the era we are living in. Either you're gonna have something what we call a cyber cold, and cyber cold is small incidents. Someone sends you a phishing email, a message, or something not maybe as significant. Over-the-counter medication from a cyber is probably enough and doesn't require heavy forensic or remediation from the firm like us or from individuals like Adam and myself. Cyber flu is a little bit worse. That's almost like dealing with a virus infection. Generally takes you between 1 to 6 months to cure. And you probably will need an attorney and forensic firm to get it done. Technology itself will not just help you, because technology is a pill. Technology needs doctors, specialized doctors, to deal with this type of emergency, and these are your cyber doctors. You will end up in cyber emergency room, and most likely you will be in that emergency room for around 1 to 2 months. Then you will be in a hospital where we will help you to gain a little bit of a cyber health. And then we will move you into what we call a cyber rehabilitation. It will take another 3 to 6 months. Cyber cancer is really a devastating cyber attack. Around 4 to 6% of US enterprises experience that on an annual basis. And I'll get into why it could be you. It's what we call on a nation state type of level attack, meaning a military cyber weapons are used against a commercial enterprise. It's almost like 2 jets flying over your house and shooting 2 missiles at your house. The chances of survival of such attack are very slim. If someone is really focused on you, these threat actors will get in. It's just question is how quickly can you contain them, eradicate them, and isolate them. The cyber emergency room and cyber surgery will take between 3 to 6 months to recover. Then you will end up in these cyber hospitals where a lot of the technology and monitoring will be deployed, which will take another 3 to 12 months. And your cyber rehabilitation can be around 12 to 24 months. As you can see, important pieces in whole process is emphasis on you to be recover or remediate and well that cyber incident. You can think of that as almost like a sickness. The very important session of it is that the threat actor is isolated and completely eradicated from your system. So why you would become a target? I have a great news for you. Everyone who has $500 on a bank account is a target to some criminals. It's you truly just playing a probability if those threat actors will pick you. And yes, a lot of people, it's like almost you can say, well, I'm not going to get cancer. I don't think that's something I'm going to get. You don't know. The reality is you will get one of those 3. And as Adam said it, being hacked and being compromised is a third life certainty after death and taxes. Let's talk about the current status of threat actors. Most of the attacks, as Adam pointed out right now, coming from Russia. Just because in Russia there is a good ecosystem of former cyber warriors who find it as a retirement type of employment. Around 60%, according to Microsoft right now, of attacks on Microsoft Cloud comes from Russia. Their sophistication is 8. So if you want to rank them from 1 to 10, they're very skilled threat actors. Their impact is around 4. Why 4? 10 is really their lives of people on the line. So good news is in cyber attacks, not many people die, but people do die digitally. And a former operator of Russia, General Koropko, said, there's nothing better than make Americans digitally naked and digitally kill them. And digitally, these people can die 4 times a year. Their persistence is very high, meaning once they focus on a target, they are with you, they're skating with you, they are next to you, they're parallel to you. They really want your goods, either it's data, your information, or your money. Second largest crime in the US right now is something what we call the business email compromise, meaning that they want to get into your bank account and wire money out from your system. They want to become your contractor. They want to become your third party. They want to become a beneficiary of those financial transactions. Number 1 is cyber extortion, called ransomware. They will extort you for what you have, for your information, for freezing your assets, and not give you access where you need to have access. They will also threaten you by publish a lot of data about you on a dark web from your company and from you. So how usually the engagement model working with a forensic firm really works? When we get a cyber victim, we'll get in a preparation state, meaning we look at holistically at that victim and see what kind of analysis, what type of cyber scan and forensic analysis are needed. You can think almost like a doctor preparing for a surgery, and we look at various frameworks that are needed to support our understanding of that cyber patient. In the second phase, we respond to your cyber needs. We will look what that actually is, what type of cyber surgery we need to conduct, how much cyber oxygen that patient actually needs. And we use something called digital forensic science to do that. The same way the doctors have tools, we have tools and technology to help us to make very sound judgment of your situation and understand the persistence of the threat actor and how to eradicate the threat actor from your system. In the last phase, we basically close the incident. And it's nothing different than you getting an insurance bill and a report, what really happened and how it happened. And what could you do to prevent it, if possible? Or what could be the signs that you detect early? Sometimes you can't protect yourself, but you can detect early and mitigate the threat actor, meaning isolate him very quickly in your environment and help the threat actor staying isolated. What we do, we usually engage, you can think of us almost like a cyber 911, where people have an issue, they contract us on an annual basis, and we provide those services, almost like your insurance provider. And then you also have the services where we literally do this in trained fashion, where we do a quarterly checks through the phases that I have just described. And we always welcome when you have any questions.
All right, terrific. That's a really helpful overview, Adam and Ondrej. So let's move on to the Q&A part of the presentation now. As a reminder, you can submit questions in one of 2 ways. We've got some people already putting them into the widget. You can also send them again to Mildred Palo at Klingenstein.com. That's MILDRED.PALO at KLINGENSTEIN.com. So let's start out with a question here. So I'll let you guys decide who should discuss this first here, but what are 1 or 2 things that are on people's minds, most top of mind when it comes to things that keep them up at night related to cyber concerns?
Ondrej, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. So most of the individuals are really thinking why they would be a target of the cyber attack, and then what will it do when it happens? And the answer to that is, look, you are just that unlucky individual or that lucky individual that someone actually focused on you. and it's just going to happen. So what could you really do when that happens? And as in a normal world, you have friends and you know individuals who can help you. It's good to actually save a number of someone who can help you and call them and ask them, I've been just victim of a cyber attack. What should I do? The last thing you want is to be your own doctor, your own hero. That will not help you. So seek the help from the professionals and learn from it. The same you're asking doctor questions, the same you should ask your cyber doctor questions. And you should stay as much cyber healthy and engage in good cyber hygiene. But it still doesn't prevent from you being cyber sick.
See, that's where we differ just a teeny little bit. And that is that I do believe that you have to set up things as best you can, as I said earlier, to make yourself a harder target. However, if you do become a victim, that's why Ondrej's 1,000% right. You have to get assistance, but it's important to know in advance. That's why if you contact your insurance company, your financial services rep, or your employer, there are programs available to help you. And many of those programs have retained companies like Ondrej's to get you through these incidents. You do not want to try to get yourself through the incident without assistance. But I think we both want to stress the fact that a lot of people will look in the mirror and go, I'm just me. Why would anyone want to attack me? And the answer is because you may look like you when you look in the mirror, but to a hacker, you're Beyonce, you're Jay-Z, you're Adam Levine. You got what they want. And again, either because of information you have about you, or more importantly, to many of them, you could be the tributary to a larger river. Example, they got into Target not through the front door, but by compromising an employee of an HVAC subcontractor and then use the access of that subcontractor straight through into the Target systems.
You're on mute, Greg.
Sorry, thanks. So maybe if we dig a little bit deeper into some of the things you had mentioned earlier, some of the tools that we have. So can you talk a little about two-factor authentication, how it works, when we should be using it, password managers, and other sorts of tools that we might want to engage in terms of helping to protect?
Yeah, let me take that. I created a framework in the book that I referenced called the 3 M's. How do you minimize your risk of exposure? How do you monitor so you know as quickly as possible that you have an issue? How do you manage the damage? And a critical portion of the first M, how do you minimize your risk of exposure, reduce your attackable surface? First of all, you have to have long and strong passwords. You cannot share them across your universe of websites. So many people use password as a password, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You don't want to do that. One thing that can be very helpful to you is a password manager, and that is something that it goes on your laptop, your computer, your smartphone. That is, it keeps an inventory of your passwords. It will even create passwords for you. The second thing is two-factor authentication, which is don't rely just on a password alone, because as I've said to many people, really, you could have the most impossible to decipher password in the world, but if it's on a database that has been breached and they get your user ID and your indecipherable password, they now can run that against every possible account they think you have. So an additional layer of protection is two-factor authentication, which is, let's say, a code is sent to a trusted device like your email or your phone. That's where a thumbprint may be required, a retinal scan. It really depends upon what they're doing. I know MasterCard was testing something where you would actually, if you were doing a transaction, you would take a selfie and you would blink to show proof of life. And that would be one of the ways that they could authenticate you. And they're doing it many different ways. They even have things like the Google Authenticator, which is where it changes the number every 30 seconds to 1 minute. And you have to enter that number as a code before you're allowed to continue logging in.
Okay, great.
And sorry,
go ahead. Please.
And I can just expand what Adam pointed out is you also have to be cautious not to think that your phone is two-factor, meaning your SMS, because there is something called SIM swapping, and we've seen that from more complex type of cases where they truly just disconnect your provider from your phone and they become your phone. So application is something that you install on that phone, not just that you receive the code in the message itself, in SMS message, because that's proven to be actually hackable.
And it's very important, just to follow up, it's very important to understand that there have been so many cases where someone has enough information about you that they can call your mobile provider and convince them they're you, and then convince them to transfer your phone number to another device. So that's why it's not the silver bullet. It is simply another arrow in your quiver.
Great. And maybe just thinking about passwords, what advice would you guys have in terms of, how frequently to change them, how to construct them, things of that nature?
Ondrej?
I can answer that. Yeah, thank you, Adam. So if you have something what we call the passphrase, so it's not a password, but it's really a phrase, meaning like a sentence, as long as it's not my name of a dog is, right? So yeah, as long as it's something not silly, generally 2 years to change that passphrase is fine. If you're using two-factor authentication, then usually we recommend that every year you change the password. Why? Because there could be options how to actually reset your password without two-factor. So you always want to be sure that wherever that password has been for a year, it's decommissioned after a year. And then general practice, just changing the passwords is on around 3 months. Now you say, well, that's a lot of changes. And indeed that is. So most likely than not, you may actually need some software that's going to save and help you to fill these passwords. For example, I have over 3,000 passwords, and they're all unique. There's no way I could remember very complex 14, 16 characters passwords. So I use a piece of software, like a password manager, that helps me actually with password management, and it helps me to sign on to the various sites and places where I need to go.
And I see a question floating up, and that is, what happens if your password manager gets hacked? Well, Ondrej can speak to that technically, but I can say that of the situations that I'm aware of, and a couple of them have been hacked, they use very high level, almost military grade encryption. So even if the password manager is hacked, what they get is something they pretty much can't use.
Yeah, and it's password manager you have to really protect very well, right? So that will have a two-factor. It will have its own application, most of them I would say already have been probed in the past, and they even been something government certified. So we don't believe as much that these providers would be not necessarily hacked. But when your computer gets hacked and someone gets access to the vault of all your passwords, that's a problematic, right? Then it becomes a problematic because ultimately then even that password manager actually fails.
However, just remember, don't forget your password to your password manager, or else you could have a problem.
Yeah, that is correct.
How about following up on that a little bit, what about biometrics or other things other than sort of two-factor, other sort of security mechanisms? You guys have any thoughts on that? How safe and secure are they, whether it's, your Face ID through your phone or things like that?
Ondrej?
I can take that, yeah. So it's the biometrics, it's not really recommended since there are various attacks that has been replicated. For example, to take your fingerprint and make almost like a finger, just based on a fingerprint that you left on a glass. And that technology is just not something that generally was accepted as a two-factor. It does work for some of the quick access or locking mechanisms, but for authentication or authorization of you getting into something, especially online, it's not something that's recommended. And again, it's just because it can be replicated. And also, if someone really wants to get into that account, there's often like recovery mechanisms for biometrics when biometric actually fails, when it's not available. And those backup options do need to be available, because imagine you cut your finger and now you can't unlock your phone forever. right? So there are always like a backdoors into the biometrics itself, just because it is a biometric that today you have everything well, right? Like, but what happens with tomorrow? Let's say something is different with your biometric data, especially with your bio data, and you can authenticate with that finger that you used before. So it's not something that's generally accepted or have been used for authentication.
Okay, terrific. And you guys had mentioned air gap backups. Could you explain what that means exactly, and to degree that something is, how that works, and do you need to close the gap to create a backup, and how is that? Are those things protected from viruses themselves? Are there things, how do you ensure that you don't install ransomware on your air gap backup? Maybe if you can talk a little about that topic.
Ondrej, why don't you start on that one?
Sure. So it's when you create an air gap backup, really means that, imagine you take almost your data and you unlock another room and you store it in that room, meaning that to get the data, you really need to unlock some different room and get it out. So usually those systems are only connected to network when backup is performed, and then they are disconnected. The whole motion of air gap backups is that the threat actor, the hackers, when they get into your network, they cannot have access through network, through computer systems, to that backup. So what happens if the threat actor was on the network, let's say 100 days prior, and install some kind of malware? There is a process in forensic that we use to actually examine what happened in that incident. And we also scan, imagine almost like your doctor conducts a CAT scan. So we scan these backups for any signs of the intrusions. And often we find that the threat actor was on the system, and we are able to remove the threat actor from the backup itself. But probability that backup is infected might be very high, close to 40%.
But Ondrej, in terms of that, the whole point of air gap backup really is that nobody knows exactly when it's going to do the backup. Now, if someone's sitting on your system for several months, then you may have a problem. But at least you should find a way to back your stuff up and get it off so that you have it in a separate place. The other thing too is you will get notices, depending upon your software or firmware, that will tell you to update. And that's very important when you get a notice to update that you do it, because oftentimes that update is based on the fact that a vulnerability has been discovered and they've created a patch, and you need to apply the patch in order to make your system more secure. But make sure that the notification of the update doesn't come to you in an email. It's got to come to you by the normal process that particular software or firmware either indicates that it needs to be updated or that it sends you a special notification. But again, through the system you're used to receiving it in, not through an email.
And when we think about what causes ransomware, if it happens to be floating around on your system, how does it come to life? We talked about maybe it could inadvertently get installed on that back. How does it come to be on your system? Maybe we could talk about that, and obviously some of the things you should try to do.
From the 50,000 foot perspective, and Ondrej will then bring you into the weeds on this, which he needs to, is that you clicked on the wrong link on an email. I think in the old days, Ondrej, it used to be that someone would get your credentials, your user ID and password, and then they would use that to get in the system, and then they would do it. But most of the time today, really, it comes through email that is disguised to look like email coming from your boss, or as Ondrej was talking about, business email compromise. And sometimes what it will do is it will put the malware on your system and it will lay dormant until something else will be received by your system, which actually triggers it. And I think it's called, it's stenographic. But Ondrej, maybe you could be even more specific there.
Adam, that is exactly what we call the initial system or initial vector of the compromise. And Russians really like to know you, meaning that they usually sign like you. They know your username and password because you're using as much, and they go to these dark databases on internet and find all your compromised passwords, and they get into the game of guessing your new password into your email or to your online system. They're very good at it, and they're very accurate. It usually does work very well. They're also very good to find a way to go around a two-factor authentication if you have, as I mentioned, through the backdoors and some other systems. So most likely not, you're going to be attacked directly from a front. That's the one possibility. Second one is what Adam mentioned are these emails, links, pictures, documents. You click on them and you get infected by malicious software, and that software now allows them to control your computer and get possession of what you have on that computer and see how you're going to do online banking, see what else you do, and get access to whatever you have access. Now the threat actors actually do have access as well. So
I mean, oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So get infected. Look, there's nothing that you're doing wrong. I mean, of course, you have to stay cyber healthy and elevate like a cyber hygiene. But the reality is like in life, everyone is touched by some type of sickness and virus. The question is like, how quickly can you protect that it's not spreading any further? How quickly can you detect it? And how quickly can you really stop it?
Now, when it comes to identity theft, the ways, first of all, you should freeze your credit. Absolutely. You can do it. It's free. Again, it's not perfect. It doesn't stop somebody that already knows specific numbers like credit card numbers and they use those numbers to run up your credit card. But you freeze your credit. You get your credit report and you read it and you look specifically for what you didn't do as opposed to what you did do. You also monitor your credit scores. If your credit score takes a sudden precipitous drop that you can't explain, it's either because you didn't pay a bill, not good, you're using too much of your available credit, not good, or you're a victim of identity theft, really not good. Also, you sign up for transactional alerts, which notify you in your bank account or your credit cards every time there's activity in your account. And part of the reason why that's so important is that millions of credit cards and debit cards are sold on the dark web, and they're sold, among other things, by zip code. And that's done to evade bank tracking systems. So your bank may miss the fact that it wasn't you that was around the corner from where you live using your debit card, but you can say, wait a minute, I wasn't there. I wasn't even anywhere near my home at the time that I supposedly used my debit card. So it's not me. And then you can do something and notify somebody about it.
Great. And so we have one really good question here, which is sort of going over some of the things that we talked about. But if you're a small firm, maybe we can also include this in sort of the checklist. Like, what should you be thinking about doing? Bank accounts, email, personal stuff. You obviously would change passwords, initiate two-factor, and talk to IT. But there's a lot of things to kind of in running a small firm to be concerned about. What else would you sort of recommend? Like, how do you get your head around that problem and protecting yourself?
My
Ondrej,
suggestion.
Why don't you start on that?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Adam. So my suggestion is that you talk to someone twice a year. So it's almost like going to doctor twice a year. You go and find some specialist, and you talk to him twice a year for an hour or 2 hours consultation, and then tell him what you have and what you don't have. Okay, I have endpoint protection, but it doesn't protect this. I have firewall. This protect this, doesn't protect that. I have some network monitoring, or I'm monitoring in events, but I'm not really reviewing any alarms. I'm not doing anything with them. And then you really tell them what type of cyber hygiene you have and what you don't have. And then he's going to go and set up a plan, what Adam mentioned, that how you can elevate your SIM and become more cyber mature. Because you don't have to outrun that bear. You just have to be faster than everyone else who is behind you. So you want to stay ahead of the curve. And the same as you do in a normal life, once you find a doctor, he will help you to stay ahead of the curve.
But I think it's very important to understand, and again, we put this in the context of the 3 M's. is you have to build, in an effort to reduce your attackable surface, you have to create a culture of privacy and security from the mailroom to the boardroom, or if you're working in a very small company, sometimes from home, from your living room to your office. And that is where everybody buys into the concept that we all are responsible for contributing to the cybersecurity of our organization. And that means educate, educate, educate. People have to understand what the threats are. They also have to understand how they can make those threats become a reality, that each of us has a role to play. And that means we don't use the same passwords in our private lives that we use in our work. And they're very discreet and they're long and strong. We use two-factor authentication. We don't simply click on a link because we think it came from the boss. If you get something from somebody that you work with that says, oh, by the way, I've attached a document here, I want you to take a look at it and give me your feedback, it may be a buzzkill. Pick up the phone, call the person and say, did you really just send me this? Or get up from your desk and walk around the corner and ask somebody. It's these kinds of things that you use, and for small companies, it may not be a cheap date, and Greg and I talked about this earlier, is that get a work-only device and make sure that anyone that works for your organization, they only use that device, have the security protocols on that device that your ID department and your security guys say is very important. Have that device monitored and checked every so often to make sure that those devices are online. And then the critical rule with everyone is that just throwing money at technology is not going to solve your security problem. Bottom line is that humans err. Humans make mistakes. People do something precipitously. And you also have to create an environment where somebody who works for you, if they do click on the wrong link, if they find out that the information that could help someone get into your system because of a mistake they made is helping that person and it gives them access, speak up about it. Do not create an environment where people are scared to death to say something because they think the first thing you're going to do is fire them. And then monitor your systems and have a damage control program in place. And this is something you test. You work with an outside firm, and every part of your company, because remember, small companies can still be multi-million-dollar companies with lots of people. It's not just the IT department. It's the legal department or your outside counsel. It's the HR department. It's your technology department. It's your communications department, your outside PR firm. Because again, it's not just telling a regulator or a class action attorney or a really upset business partner, hey, I really secured the stuff. The next question is, but if something goes wrong, did you respond urgently, transparently, and empathetically? Because if you don't, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Okay, great. And that's very helpful. Obviously, it's going to cost some money, and that's just sort of part of the process. But it has to be, I think, what you're saying, spent intelligently. How might you recognize whether it's a business or an individual? So there's all these things we talked about in terms of protection, all the bad things that can happen. What are some of the early signs that you've got a problem? There's some obvious things. Obviously, somebody calls you up and locks your system, but what else should you be looking for? You talked about monitoring. What kinds of things, both personal and business-wise, should you be doing to ensure that?
Well, let me start with that, and then I'll turn it over to Ondrej. First of all, if you start as an individual, if you start getting calls from debt collectors for things that you know you didn't do, then you got to look at your credit report right away. If your credit score drops precipitously in a short period of time, you need to figure out why that happened. If you find out that a hospital is pursuing you for a medical bill, and this is a lot of people become victims of medical identity theft, it's very important to get to the bottom of why that happened. So you need to stay on top of things. Believe it or not, as an individual, looking at something like the explanation of benefits statement that you get from your insurance company, we've had cases where people looked at that notice they got and realized it wasn't them. I mean, we had a case, a 72-year-old grandmother from upstate New York, who on the same day noticed that her insurance company was billed for a sperm viability test and a pregnancy test. And she was a 72-year-old grandmother. So obviously she was a victim of medical identity theft. Another problem, which is a little obvious, you're driving down the car, you're pulled over for a busted taillight. Suddenly your car is surrounded by guys with guns telling you to get on the ground, and they handcuff you because someone committed a crime using your identity, and that trail of breadcrumbs comes back to you. Or your child starts getting credit card offers, or a debt collector calls about your child. Your child could have been a victim of child identity theft, which is a significant, serious problem. Another one that a lot of people have had, you go to file your tax return and you're blocked because you find out that someone using your social security number has already filed a return in your name. Or you're waiting for your refund and it never shows up. That's because someone filed before you, you didn't realize it. Somehow your return got through, but the refund is going to them. Also, you get a dunning notice from the Internal Revenue Service saying you woefully unreported your income because unbeknownst to you, someone using your social security number got a job and that income is being reported to your social security number. So these are, warning signs. Also, if you sign up for more sophisticated forms of monitoring, that's where you get a notice saying you're applying for credit right now when you're not. Or as part of transactional monitoring, you're alerted to the fact that your credit card charges are building up and you say, but I'm not using my credit card. That's one of those indications you've got a problem too.
Do you have any recommendations? I'm not sure if this is sort of, something you guys feel comfortable doing, but in terms of, you mentioned ID monitoring, like what are good ones? What are bad ones? Like if you don't know what to do and you type it into Google, you're probably just as likely to get yourself into trouble as get help. So you have any advice on how to go about looking at those things?
Well, yeah, I mean, they have a number of very good and sophisticated programs. The 3 credit reporting agencies offer them, and they all have pretty solid, robust ones. You have companies like Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, Credit.com that also offer a lot of these monitoring programs, and they're good. But it's very important, don't look at something as a straight credit monitoring. That's not enough. You need a program that will notify you when your social security number is in play, which the good ones will notify you of, as well as those that offer dark web monitoring. Now, Ondrej may know some more sophisticated ones. Ondrej, what do you suggest?
Yeah, so when it comes to monitoring, I think it's what Adam pointed out. Your personal credit file is very important. What's also very important is maybe to have that monitoring on your systems and enterprise systems. It doesn't have to be anything extensive. So let's say every week someone's going to come and review those alarms. It's almost like someone's going to check those logs, that what really came in and what really got out of those systems. So that's usually where you should think about, like, you have that monitoring cover on a cyber side. Some of the companies, they build what they call security operations centers, and they do 24/7 type of monitoring. So that's very important as well, especially if there are data under compliance or some sensitive data being on your network.
So Ondrej, you're talking about like managed security providers where they manage.
That is correct. That is correct, Adam. And it doesn't have to be completely 24/7. It's just someone, let's say on a weekly basis, goes and reviews what really happened at that location with all those technology that's being deployed, right? So it could be a few hours a week mission.
And not only that, but you need, like, for instance, one of the things Ondrej's firm did that we did at CyberScout is you need someone to come in and do penetration testing. That's where, don't just rely on your folks on the inside to keep testing your systems. You need somebody from the outside, totally unaffiliated with your organization, whose main mission is to break into your systems, to figure out where the vulnerabilities are so they can properly advise the folks in your IT department to do. And also a very important thing is that it is critical that the C-suite know your cybersecurity posture. So they need to be updated on a very frequent basis, not, once a year or every half year. They need to know, and Ondrej, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at least monthly, get a report from technology based on penetration testing and monitoring of systems to know where you are with your cybersecurity situation, and then what do you need to do. Now, granted, a lot of people say, but my technology guys are driving me crazy because every minute they're coming to me with something new and it costs a fortune. Make your cost benefit analysis, but always keep in mind the fact that whatever you pay to secure your systems and train your people will be far less than what you're going to have to pay if your company becomes a victim of a serious cyber attack. And then you've got to deal with everything from regulators to your staff, to your customers, to your vendors. And also remember, when you hire a company to do something for you, especially involving the data that you've been entrusted with, vet them as if you were vetting an employee, because make no mistake, if something goes wrong with your vendor, as far as regulators, class action lawsuit attorneys, and customers are concerned, the vendor is you.
Great. So we're kind of running up on the hour here, so maybe just another question or two. So there's a very interesting one in the chat. Let me just read it. I just this morning received a phone call from the Assistant District Attorney's Office that I may have had my identity stolen, and they would like to talk to me. This was followed up by an official-looking letter, and I'm scheduled to speak with them immediately following this webinar. Any guidance appreciated? So any thoughts on kind of how to approach that?
Well, the first thing is I would independently verify that that really is the district attorney's office. And then I would call the office and say, I understand that you folks want to talk to me. Because too often you'll get a fake communication, and usually they try to use organizations that create authority figures in your mind, whether it's the IRS, the Social Security Administration, the district attorney's office, used to be the jury commission. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And, people immediately hear that, they panic and they communicate. Independently verify it's the real deal. And then you can feel more comfortable in terms of talking to them about a problem.
Great. And sorry, go ahead, Ondrej. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, that's completely agreed with Adam said. Like, to first verify that that's what it is, because the many scammers who pretend to be government agencies and they pretend to that they have some connections, and they're literally just fishing for your data, and then they will ask you questions on a call, and on your data is just out of the window, and they just basically collect information on you.
Okay, terrific. And so maybe just one last one. There are lots of good questions, and we promise we'll get back to everyone with the answers and address these. But so when you think of this time of year, are there any types of cybercrime that are more prevalent? Is there a seasonality to it and that kind of thing? Maybe if we could end up with that, your thoughts on
Let me take that. And then now again, from the consumer side, but it bleeds over into the business side as well. First of all, there's e-skimming, and that's where you go to a website and unbeknownst to you, they have put malicious code on the website. So when you enter your payment details, that's being transmitted to the scammers. But it's almost impossible for consumers to be able to find that out themselves. It's really more on the websites to deal with that. This year in particular, we're going to have supply chain related scams, which is how many times in the past few months have you been looking to buy the perfect Christmas gift for your kids or your loved ones, and it's out of stock and it's on back order. If all of a sudden somebody pops up going, I have that toy, be very careful, because they could be relying on the fact that you are desperate and you will do anything to get it, and then you find out later it wasn't real. You'll also have fake delivery scams. So if you get a notification, for instance, from UPS or FedEx, don't click on that link. Look at your account on UPS or FedEx, or contact the company's customer service and find out if somebody was really trying to contact you. The other thing is that Amazon has been a great cover for a lot of scammers during the holiday season by sending people notices, and it's not Amazon, but it looks like Amazon, saying, there's been a problem with your order. We need you to, we think you may have entered the wrong credit card information, or you may not have authenticated yourself properly. So please click here so that you can log in again. You'll also have charity scams, because this is the time of the year when people are giving. And there are a lot of hackers and scammers out there that create very real looking, or even reference really real looking charities that get you to click on the link, or they call you on the phone. If someone calls you, say, you know what, I'm going to call back. If someone sends you something by way of email, independently confirm that that is the charity. And then, you know what, either call the charity or go directly to their website. It's the old line, if you don't go to the source, you're going to feel remorse. So you need to do that during the holidays. Fake job scams are at this time of the year, fake travel scams. I know a very wealthy family that fell for a travel scam and ended up wiring $75,000 to somebody that wasn't a real travel agent based on just pure fantasy. So you have to be, this is the time of the year in particular, you got to be very, very alert. And remember, they're counting on the fact you're distracted because you got the holiday spirit. You're thinking about work and vacations and gifts. And this is when they catch you at a moment when you're not fully focused. And that's how they get you.
That is correct, Adam. Usually that focus, that moment, that just one moment, all what they need is that one moment when you're not focused. And you click on the link, you open into it. And all those things that you've done in terms of protection, detection, they'll just go out of the window. So it's just that one wrong move, right, to be at the wrong time in the wrong place, cyberspace in this case, and you are compromised.
All right, terrific.
But as a final note, because I know we're wrapping up, is look, unless you're going to live under a bottle cap at the bottom of Loon Lake and be completely off the grid, which you can't be, you have to live your life. And so it's just important to think about what we've talked about today and realize that you can make yourself a harder target. And then the important thing to know is if there's a problem, you need to know as fast as possible, and you need to have a plan. And that's why people talk to insurance companies, banks, employers, because more and more people are making plans available to help you get through these incidents. But you have to ask the question, because many organizations are horrible at letting you know they have a plan.
Terrific. Well, listen, I'm afraid we're out of time. We could probably go on for hours on this, obviously. And again, if we weren't able to get to your question, my apologies, but we're going to follow up personally with you. So thanks again, Adam and Ondrej. This was, fantastic discussion, particularly the importance, as you just said, of having a plan and staying healthy and staying on top of things. I know I'm going to personally sort of reevaluate how I'm doing things, and I'm sure a lot of people will as well. And thanks to everyone for attending. We hope you found this interesting. If you have additional questions regarding cybersecurity and how to stay safe, please reach out to us, your advisor, or any of us here at Klingenstein Fields Advisors. And please look for more events and talks and things coming of interest in 2022. And we hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday season. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.